morning. We are going to be in Leviticus today. Leviticus, woo! Leviticus has got to be one of the least appreciated books in the Bible. Ask people for their favorite book of the Bible, and nobody picks Leviticus. Ask for their favorite story in the Bible. I don't think I've ever heard anyone pick a story from Leviticus. Ask folks for their favorite chapter, and they'll mention something from the New Testament. If they're in the Old Testament, they might pick a psalm. Leviticus doesn't even rank. Favorite verse? Most people can't quote one verse from Leviticus, much less choose one as a favorite. So to understand the passage this morning, we need to understand something about Leviticus. Leviticus picks up where Exodus ends. The tabernacle has been finished, has completed. The glory of the Lord descends and fills the tabernacle so tangibly, so powerfully, that even the great prophet Moses, the man with the glowing face, got to see God on the mountain, is unable to enter. This is how intense the presence of God is. A holy God has taken up residence with a community. So a holy God graciously provides a way for sinful, broken people, us, to enter his presence. God does so by means of putting forward some specific rituals, calling out a priesthood, and inviting a people to live lives of moral purity. A passage that brings these elements together, holy God, sinful humanity, ritual, priesthood, moral purity, is found in Leviticus chapter 10. And if you have your Bibles, I'm going to invite you to turn there. We're just going to read 3 verses from there. But by the time we get to chapter 10 in Leviticus, God has been super clear on what is expected. Verse after verse after verse after verse, God spoke to Moses, detailing exactly what he required. We know Moses passes on these instructions faithfully because at the end of Leviticus chapter 9, Aaron's offering is accepted. The fire of the glory of God consumes the offering on the altar. So a sign that God has accepted Aaron's offering. But then we read this in Leviticus chapter 10, starting at verse 1, now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it and laid incense on it and offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord said. Among those who are near me, I will be sanctified, and before all the people, I will be glorified." In other words, those who come near me will treat me as holy and honor and glorify me before the congregation. Now, we go, wait, back up a bit. Nadab and Abihu died because they offered incense that smelt a little bit different from everyone else's? What's the big deal? What are we missing here? So a little more background might be helpful. The tabernacle is an otherworldly spectacle for Israel, okay? There has never been anything like it in the whole world. Every single aspect of it is meticulously prescribed and designed by God. The point is to highlight the otherness, the holiness of God, the sights, the sounds they would hear, the gold and the jewels, the carvings, richly colored veils and screens, the clothes, the vestments and behavior of the priest, everything about it is unique. The things said and seen, candlesticks, altar, sacrifice, smoke, cloud of glory, everything is unique. There is no shrugging here. There is no, whatever, it doesn't really matter to God. I can bring whatever I want, wear whatever I want, offer whatever I want kind of attitude, which is increasingly becoming common in our own worship. Every detail is precise and precisely placed, and to be precisely executed. It is set apart. It is holy. It is unique. Even the smell of the place. Check out Exodus chapter 30, verses 34 to 38. God gives a very specific recipe to Moses and says, "This incense gets used nowhere else, period. There is only one place on the planet where a person could smell this smell, the tabernacle. Not the market. You wouldn't walk into a rich person's house and smell it. Not the politician, not the perfumers. One place. You won't smell it in a foreign country when you're traveling abroad. It wasn't exotic. It was unique, set apart. Somebody walked by you and you catch a whiff of this smell, you knew where that person had been. If somebody walks by you smelling strongly of it, you knew that person had been in the presence of God before the altar. Now get this. Since you couldn't pick up this smell anywhere else, you couldn't fool someone into thinking you had been in the place of worship if you hadn't. You wouldn't smell right. You could say, God told me, God said, God spoke to me, God this, God, all you want, but I can tell by your smell whether you're lying or not. So had the brothers joyfully and faithfully offered the prescribed incense in the prescribed way at the prescribed time, that would have been a faithful response. What we called last week, responding to God's invitation with faith. That is complete, wholehearted, joyful, loving obedience. But their response was not a faithful response. Now, to be clear, this was not a mistake. It's not like someone had mixed up the labels on the jars in the storage room and they put the wrong incense in their censers. Nor was it an accident. It's not like, Nadab tripped and knocked over the wrong incense into his brother. Said that it wasn't an accident. This was a willful, conscious act. They each took a censer. They each put fire or coals in the censer. They each mixed up a batch of incense that was unique. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem came when they put that incense on the fire in their censers. They both offered something that God had not commanded. They were not following the instructions, and they knew it. They were being publicly and openly disobedient to God. That's foolish. I'm defining a foolish response as any type of partial obedience. That is, when we know what God requires, but only partially obey. I mean, all they did was change one little thing, right? So I challenged you to do an exercise last week. And I want to say this journey builds, okay? So where we are right now, we're not going to be in, 4 weeks or 6 weeks. The journey builds one step upon another. And you're going to see that as I'll invite you to do an exercise here, and then I'll change it, tweak it as we go so that it's something completely different. I suggested that when God speaks to you this week, it'll mostly be about those relationships closest to you, your family, your close friends, etc. It has to start there, but it won't stay there. I'm not going to ask, for you to, tell me whether or not you did, but I do want you to do an honest evaluation of whether or not you did what God told you to do in the way that God told you to do it. Now, if you didn't write anything down because it's an exercise, I'm about that, then you're going to have trouble with that because you're going to conclude that you did all right? Like, when you don't write, we always kind of make ourselves look better in our memory. So you're going to go, yeah, God told me to do it, I did it. But if you've written it down, you know that it's a little bit different. You're ready to write down, God spoke to me. You go, I'm not sure. Maybe God, I think God, and you're a little more honest about it. You're a little more transparent with it. You have to think it through. Whereas if you're just doing it off the top of your head, we tend to make ourselves look good in those moments, or better than we should. But I'd like to challenge you, those of you who did participate, to keep it going for another week, starting each morning. Father, please speak to me today. If you didn't participate last week, you can start this week. That's fine. The instructions are online. The week 3 care group video will give you the specific instructions. But I want to add a 5th step, okay? I'm calling this the faith to share okay? And I'm going to invite you to share one of your God spoke to me moments with your care group, okay? I believe God spoke to me in this. This was my response. And again, the instructions are in the care group materials. Share your response, and then I'm going to invite you to enter into a time of evaluation around that thing that you shared, okay? So here comes the prophetic version of this message. That's the personal part, the care group part. Here comes the prophetic part. So as we journey through this series, I want to resist the cultural urge to settle for the individualistic lessons. For example, when God speaks to me, I need to be careful to blah, blah, blah. When God speaks to me, or God is speaking to me, and I'm, okay, that's all good and well, and we do need to start there, but it misses the point. If we stay there, it misses the point and lacks the power that God makes available to his church. True, the exercise is very individualistic right now. I know that, but that's because it's an exercise and it's a step on the journey. Okay? If this is your home church, if you're watching this as a part of the Tillsonburg Alliance Church, you will need to give an account for whether your church family, the church family you claim to be a part of, was faithful or foolish in responding to God. You will have to give an account to God for whether your church family was faithful or foolish. Remember Achan in Joshua chapter 7? The lone man who acts in disobedience, and the community pays the price. You and I are part of a community. The Bible calls it a body. For years, Christians have hopscotched from one church to the next church, seeking the flavor of the month, from one hot program to the next, from one hot book to this hot series that promises the fire of God's glory. We have become consumed with personal experiences, personally hearing God and personally responding to the neglect of the teaching and the call of God that we are to be a body, his body. God has spoken, is speaking to his church, yes, to Tillsonburg Alliance Church. And when we fail to do as he instructs, we are faithless. When we are scared to do as he instructs, we live disobedient lives. When we do our own thing, the thing that works for us, we are offering and responding in foolishness. And that has always been and will always be a dangerous thing to do. There is a story in the New Testament that, if not parallel, certainly contains several similarities to Leviticus chapter 10. And speaking, of course, of Acts chapter 5, it also involves two related people conspiring together. In Leviticus, it's two brothers. In Acts, it's a husband and wife. It's a married couple. The Acts 5 passage also centers on an offering made to God. In Leviticus, it's the incense before the altar. In Acts, it's an offering of money laid before the church. They are also struck dead in public view to protect the glory of God. In Leviticus, the brothers are struck with fire. In the New Testament, they drop dead instantly. And both stories refer to the impact of their actions on the corporate body. In Leviticus chapter 10, we read, before all the people, God says, I will be glorified. In Acts chapter 5, great fear came upon the whole church and upon all who heard these things. So, we're in the middle right now of the COVID pandemic thing, racial tensions erupting, particularly in the United States, one of the craziest elections we've ever seen, again, unfolding in the U.S. And one of the questions that we face is, what does it mean to be church? Why do we gather? Now, if you've been listening to me consistently, if you've known me over several years, you know this is a question I have been harping on for a while now. But in this time in which we live, there is this longing to return to quote unquote normal, to get back to normal worship services with bands and more congregational singing and our children's program and our youth program and our potlucks and our lunches. Please, can we stop while we have the chance and ask ourselves some hard questions? What are we called to do and be? What is the church? What was Jesus talking about when Jesus said, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it? Replace gates of hell with just about anything. If it can stop us from being the church, we were never church to begin with. If money prevails and prevents us from being church, if fatigue prevails, if COVID, boredom, persecution can keep us from being the church, we were never church in the first place. What is church? Are we giving to God what he demands, what he deserves, or are we offering an incense of our own making to God? Are we wholehearted in our devotion, or are we keeping back a portion like Ananias and Sapphira in Acts? And this is not about money. This is not about money. It's bigger than that. Is our obedience faithful obedience? Or are we saying, oh, we've got a church, but okay, we'll do church, but we'll do it our way. The elements included in the gathering will be of our own making, our own choosing, our own preferences, our own wants, our own desires. What are we offering to God? Incense or pretense? What are we offering to God? Incense or nonsense? Listen, hear me very clearly. I am not saying that what we as a church are offering to God is the equivalent of what Nadab and Abihu did. I am not saying that. What I am doing is I'm asking, what if it is? If I, me, and my rests at the heart of everything we do, how can our offering be anything other than an incense of our choosing, our making, our heart, the smell that we want? And everything in Scripture suggests that is a dangerous way to approach a holy God. Maybe the reason we're still standing is because the glory has departed.